Hi, I'm Dr. Bonnie Nish, Executive Director of We're Vancouver. I want to welcome you to our first ever Hybrid Festival. We're thrilled this year to be back in person after 2 long years of being online. We're hopeful that you're going to find the diverse programming that we've set out for you be something that you can find something of enjoyment, something that will educate you, something you can have fun with, bring your family to, bring a book to, and wander around and meet all kinds of authors. We want to also take a moment to thank all those sponsors who make this possible every year. The Canada Arts Council, Canada Book Fund, Canada Periodical Fund, Canada Heritage Fund, BC Gaming, Joseph Walks Foundation, the Hamver Foundation, DVBIA, and so many more. We also want to thank Penguin Random House for coming on board to make sure that we could have ASL interpreters on site this year as well. Please stop by, bring a book, find a book, say hello, and enjoy the day.
Hi there. My name is Dave Seaweed, and I'm the Indigenous Coordinator at Douglas College. I am from the Kwakiutl Nation, born and raised in East Vancouver. My father and his father before him are from Port Hardy in Alert Bay. I would like to acknowledge that I'm sharing with you today on the Kakite First Nation, which is the new Westminster Band, and thank Chief Rhonda Larrabee for supporting our work at Douglas College. As is my understanding, the Word Vancouver Festival spread throughout the Lower Mainland and Fraser Valley and online throughout North America and beyond. I would also acknowledge the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Coquitlam nations. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, where we live, we learn, we play, and we do our work. 95% of British Columbia, including Vancouver, is on unceded traditional First Nations territory. Unceded means that First Nations people never ceded or legally signed away their lands or gave them away to the Crown or to Canada. I have been asked why we acknowledge First Nations territory. Many organizations, governments, and school districts have adopted the practice of acknowledging traditional territories as a way to honor and show respect to the Aboriginal inhabitants of this land, the First Peoples. This practice enables wider municipal communities to share in Aboriginal cultures and leads to better relationships and understandings. Observing this practice connects participants with the traditional territory and provides a welcoming atmosphere to the land where people are gathering. We believe that acknowledging territory is a positive step towards reconciliation, which involves a commitment to learning about and understanding the real history of Canada's Aboriginal peoples and taking responsibility for reconciliation with Aboriginal peoples in Canada. The process of reconciliation is tied to the federal government's relationship with Indigenous peoples. The term has come to describe attempts made by individuals and institutions to raise awareness about colonization and its ongoing effects on Indigenous peoples. I would encourage you all, young and old, to do a little research about where you live, work, or go to school, and in turn, find out what First Nations territory you are on, so you can acknowledge when asked or for sharing at events. I wanted to conclude by mentioning the September 30th national holiday that began last year as National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th. In First Nations communities, we have been honoring Orange Shirt Day since 2013. The origins for the day come from a story about Phyllis Webstad's experience. She went to the mission for one school year in 73 and 74. She had just turned 6 years old and lived with her grandmother on the Dog Creek Reserve. They never had very much money, but somehow her grandmother managed to buy her a new outfit to go to the mission school. She remembers going to the store, picking out a shiny orange shirt. It had string laced up in front and was so bright and exciting, just like she felt to be going on to school. When she got to the mission, they took away her clothes, including the orange shirt. She never wore it again. She didn't understand why they wouldn't give it back to her. The color orange has always reminded her of that and how her feelings didn't matter, how no one cared, and how she felt like she was worth nothing. All of the little children were crying and nobody cared. We now wear orange shirts that always say, "Every child matters." I would encourage you all to wear orange shirts on September 30th and become an ally and partner for First Nations folks dealing with the residential school findings. I'm wishing you all the best during your time with Word Vancouver 2022. Stay strong and stay safe. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us to Word Vancouver 2022, The Cooking Life with Suzanne Barr. My name is Necole Hines, and I am a cannabis chef in Vancouver, BC, which I also acknowledge is on the unceded, occupied, ancestral traditional Coast Salish territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. So, everybody, I just wanted to let you know before we get started that you won't have access to your video or your mic to be able to ask any questions. So feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat, and we will make sure that we get to it as quickly as possible. Also, I just wanted to remind everyone that you can purchase the book My Ackee Tree through Iron Dog Books, or you can support the festival through our silent auction. And without you, this free festival could not happen. If you haven't already, please consider making a donation via the link that you will see in the chat. All right, so before I start chatting with Suzanne, I do want to tell you a bit about her. I'm so thrilled. Okay, so Suzanne Barr is one of North America's most respected chefs with a signature flair for Afro-Caribbean comfort food. She recognized the significance of food from an early age, growing up in a household with two novice chefs, where preparing every meal was an opportunity to bond as a family, learn about cultural roots, tell stories, and express love. This instilled a lifelong passion to value the significant role food plays in nourishing not just the body, but the soul. Her food is a reflection of her roots and is ever evolving as she travels the world, refining her culinary and personal education. Suzanne's food philosophy is to create an elevated way to make the ordinary surprisingly extraordinary. Her impressive past culinary repertoire includes Hess chef owner at True True Diner in Toronto, owner of Saturday Dinette, inaugural chef in residence at the Gladstone Hotel, a resident at Sand and Pearl Oyster Bar in Prince Edward County, starring role as one of the chefs in the acclaimed documentary film The Heat, A Kitchen Revolution, and as a resident judge on Food Network Canada's series Wall of Chefs. So Suzanne, is the ting. Okay, guys. I mean, she also regularly advocates for food security and also my bad here. Sorry, technical difficulties. Sorry about that. She also advocates for food security, people of color, mental wellness, equal pay for equal work, LGBTQ communities, nutrition literacy, and food source sustainability. She is also active in the community as a board member for Not 9 to 5, a not-for-profit organization empowering the hospitality, food, and beverage industry through mental health education and support. I am so thrilled to chat about Suzanne's book, My Ackee Tree. It is a chef's memoir of finding home in the kitchen this spring. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Necole. Everyone, it is a thrill to be here. I want to recognize where I'm actually currently seated. I'm actually in South Florida, so I'm actually in unceded territories of the first Indigenous tribes of the Taino, Tequesta, Miccosukee, and then Seminole tribes, and I'm very honored to be a visitor on these lands. I've grown up here, and I'm back here with my family for a few more months doing some work, but it is an honor to be with you all, no matter where you are, whether it's BC, Toronto, wherever you are. And I'm thrilled to be chatting with you, Necole. So thank you.
Yay. Okay. So everybody, if you haven't already, oh my gosh, my window is a little bit, there we go. Okay, if you haven't already gotten this, friends, This is the ting. Okay, I am so excited about this book for so many reasons. First and foremost, I share some similarities with Suzanne, everybody. I am a first generation Canadian. My parents are Jamaican. So I felt a huge connection to this book. I'm a self-taught chef, but I basically, most of the cuisine that I do is Jamaican fusion. So I do pull a lot from the Caribbean. So there is so much connections to this book. So one of the things I wanted to chat about, because, let's start from the very beginning, is the section on childhood, the
Yeah.
section back in the day. That's where I felt so much connection. Like you want to, I'll probably just point out a phrase first before you get started is it was on page 14. There was a line that you said, my parents didn't make a conscious effort to teach me how to cook. They were just cooking all the time. And I was there watching, staring at my mother's hands around the bowl. And that's where I feel a similarity as well. Like I wasn't actually taught by my mother how to cook. The way Jamaicans or Caribbeans can teach in many, at least for me, it was like, you put a dash of this and a dollop of that and, like that kind of thing. And it was like, with my little Canadian self, it was like, but like, what about the recipe?
I think I could probably count the amount of recipes my mom used, or even my dad. My dad less than my mom. But yeah, I mean, like my sister and I, we definitely spent a lot of time near the kitchen, whether it was doing homework, watching TV. The heart of any home, for the most part, is the kitchen. And I think everyone can relate to that, whether you're at a party or whether you're at a family gathering. Where do we all end up? In the kitchen. And that is kind of like the center, the hearth of our home. And, it resonated so much to just remember that, because I think it just was pivotal in the sense that I didn't grow up deciding that I wanted to be a chef at any point. It was almost kind of like I felt back in love with understanding the connection that I could remember and make between food and love and family, storytelling, and all the things that I loved. But so involved in other things that I had been doing in my career that when I decided to, switch and pivot, it was the one thing that I was like, yeah, I'm meant to do this, because I know how much food meant to me and my family, and how that connection really resonated, through in many moments in my life, my childhood, my adolescence, my adults, so it's a really special place to find that connection to food and yourself, whether you're a home cook or if you're a chef.
Absolutely. One of the things that was a little different in my upbringing than yours is I noticed that your dad also cooked as well. Really good cook too. And, my dad can cook now, but in my childhood, it wasn't something that I saw my dad doing a lot. So I didn't even really know he had skills until, until like my mom passed away and stuff. So it was so cool to see that both parents, you were able to kind of draw.
Yeah, the thing about in our house was like my dad was the experimentalist. He was the risk taker when it came to like making foods and dishes that he may or may not have ever made before, but he just felt so inclined to just like challenge himself and to make something that he thought was, a little bit decadent, a little bit more elevated. He wanted to make sure that we understood that, food that we grew up eating was not the only food that we would be able to embrace and enjoy in our life. And I think that allowed him to really kind of show his experience of traveling, from Jamaica to Canada, and what his journeys were like, and food that maybe he had once had. And I think his own interest in making some of these foods. But my mom was classic. She would hit those classic Jamaican, staples like all the time. And then she was the one that would be a little bit more like, I'm going to make it an American dish. Like everyone talks about lasagna or baked ziti. Let me make that. Yeah. Let me just try that out. And she was the one that was like, but she went with the recipe. She was not going to like wing it. Whereas my dad would wing it. And my mom was pretty diligent about sticking to the recipe. So
Okay, so now I have a question for you because I am a little bit of a wing it girl. I'm not gonna lie. That's one of the reasons why I don't bake often, because I do wing it. What would you say? Are you a hybrid of both? Do you kind of like
I'm a hybrid
always?
of both.
Yeah.
Like definitely. You know, I think it's important to allow food to inspire you to cook. And sometimes you might just not know what you need, but then you taste it and then you start to think about, is it have the acid? Is there texture? Is there sweetness? Is there, what's missing? And that's the same way I feel about baking. Baking was my first business I ever had when I became a chef. And, like baking is like science. It's very technical. You have to understand the properties of science when baking to understand, like, what is your baking soda going to do versus your baking powder? What is your cold butter to your melted butter? What is going to happen to your dark chocolate to milk chocolate? So it's definitely taken me a lot more years to understand baking, but I have my ones that I know, like out the park. I can make a banana bread with my eyes closed.
Hey, I know I'm pretty good on the banana bread too. I have my staples, and that was one of them. And also, my mom wasn't a baker, so I think that's also where that came from. But she made a really good apple cinnamon like muffin, or an
Mm.
upside down pineapple cake. You know how that is such a
Yes, such a good.
So that I do remember. Okay, so I want to still stay on the childhood section, and I'm curious if there's like a section that you might want to read for us before we kind of move down.
Oh, sorry. I'm like, I see you just caught me there. A section to read from my book. That would be, let me see if I actually have my book on me.
And if you don't, I can step in because I got it.
Yeah, I actually, hold
Mhm.
on. I'm just checking in my bag. I don't. Can you give me
Yeah, no, you know
a
what? I
little,
am going to,
lead me in?
yes, I am going to. So this is a section. I'm just going to read page 19 for those who have the book with them. And this was a section that I also connected with as well, because I found that my parents didn't share a lot of stories. Um,
Yeah.
from their youth and stuff, right? And it's interesting when I talk to, growing up in Toronto, I had a friends of all different nationalities, right? And it's interesting where you'll hear other people like just recite all these stories of like their parents when they were kids and stuff, and I don't have a lot of that to say. So
Yeah.
this really stuck out to me. So I'm going to just start reading on page 19, just about a paragraph or two, everybody. And so it starts off, my father doesn't like memory lane either. His young life in Kingston was tough. Those memories aren't discussed without much prodding, and the answers always leave me wanting more. I get it. Why dwell on a past full of confrontation and hurt when you've spent your whole life trying to escape it? From a young age, my dad helped his mother, Frances Hilton, sell food at markets in Kingston. They sold yams, bananas, curry chicken, dumplings, and a collection of other prepared meals. Daddy would have to help to get up from the sun to help his mother cook, then transport the food to the markets, then back home to do it all over again. I see his hands pruny from washing pots, pans, plates, and serving utensils, his bare feet throbbing from hours of standing, his shoulders locked in position, close to his ears. The stress always stays there. Sleepless nights as the routine played over and over in his mind. This is true of many chefs, but he was a boy, dreaming of playing in the sand on the beach, riding on the handlebars of his father's bike. My dad is an incredible cook. He's intuitive and creative, and my friends in plantation would fight to come to our house for some of my dad's stewed peas and rice or curry goat. But when I ask him if he liked cooking when he was a kid, he says he didn't think of it as cooking, not in the sense of sharing food and giving pleasure, but as simply a job to be done. And I found that so interesting because for me, I've went through stages of that, of my relationship with cooking. Like sometimes I've loved it, sometimes I felt like it was a chore. Now I'm back to loving and being creative over the past like latter years of my life. But I really resonated with that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, like with you, how like we'll talk about like the shift of becoming a chef, but if you could just kind of speak on that section.
Yeah, no, like in writing this book, some of the challenges that I really immediately came across was trying to not, I guess tell my dad's story without actually having my dad's voice in the book, but also respecting and honoring, my grandmother, and what she was able to do to raise those children, him and his siblings. And when we started talking about his past and we started talking about his dad, and it was a struggle at times because he just doesn't talk about it. And I do think that it's the pain that is there and you may have never addressed it. And I think that's something that my dad and I never sat down prior to knowing to write this book. We've never really talked about his dad. We never talked about what it was like to feel like this is a job. This was just what you had to do. You didn't have an option. You didn't have choices. Where, us growing up as kids in our house, like we weren't forced to be in the kitchen with my parents. My parents, my dad was an entrepreneur, self-taught in the work that he'd done for years. And yet the sacrifices that he made for us was one to make sure that we didn't ever feel like we couldn't, follow our passion. And, at the same time, maybe he didn't get that opportunity, but I think he also appreciated after reading this and sharing the story that enabled him to have this gift that allowed him to travel in so many different spaces and to use this trade, these skills that were like this forced work on him, but it enabled him to see the world, and it also enabled him to explore a side of himself that he didn't know and to share that with his children and his family. I think that's many stories of many immigrants traveling and being, put in situations while growing up that you don't have choices. You don't always get the choices, the options to do the thing that you're most excited about doing. Work is work and fun is when it's allowed to. And I don't know if necessarily my dad was always allowed to have fun growing up. I think wherever he could get it in, he did. But for me, I think he sees me now doing this work, and he is proud and honored that I found a space that is true for me. And he sees that it's not this feeling that I'm forced to do this, but the labor of joy that I'm doing in the work that I'm doing, and how many people I get a chance to be inspired by, and I get to inspire other people with the work that I do. So, yeah.
I love that. Okay, so I have another question because this was so interesting to me. So as I mentioned, everybody, we do share some similarities, first generation Canadian and all of that. However, the difference is I was born and raised, like I didn't leave Toronto until I was like in my late 20s, right? Whereas you moved to Plantation, Florida. And I would love to hear, I mean, if you've read it, you read it, but I think it's so interesting to just hear you speak on that and speak on your experience there.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I'm still in Plantation right now. Like my family house, and we're the Ackee tree, which is the title of the book. This is the same house that my parents built, and we moved in here when I was at the age of, I think, 11 or 12. And Plantation for me growing up always felt a bit awkward. It was a place that my parents had settled in. They had, I think, whether it was just finding a home and a house that felt safe for their kids to roam and to get access to good schools and the neighborhood schools. Plantation was that for my parents. Now, I think for me, when I went to university, the first year was in New York, and I was meeting people that weren't from Florida, that weren't from Miami, that weren't from Fort Lauderdale, that weren't from Plantation. And here I am sharing with folks like, where are you from? And I'm like, Florida. Where about? Plantation. Wait, what? There was a bit of shame. There was a lot of shame around it. I didn't grow up as a Black American, but I had enough of Black American history and friends and engagement and just being a Black person living in America. I think it had me very clear of understanding that, this was a significant name that spoke to, the history of slavery in this country. And we have yet to make the changes that I think we've all been pushing and striving for. And even just 2 years ago, they made a strong attempt to change the name of Plantation to the name of Sunrise. And I think now when people address this part of town, it's with the same intention of like, oh gosh, Plantation. But I think people are starting to use the new name of Sunrise as being a better way to kind of, label and tell the story of this area. But I think the shame for me had to kind of help me understand that it wasn't my shame that I needed to hold on to. It was a choice as a family to move here. My parents made the decision for my sister and my brother and I. But I think more than anything else, it was my choice to kind of try to find a way to surrender and release and let go of this feeling that I was not a part of that process. I was not part of that history. However, the ancestors, the many spirits that still lie in the earth and resonate within these lands, I hold them with so much honor, and I walk with so much pride when I am in this part of the world, because I know how hard I've had to fight and how hard my parents had to fight in order to be here, to stay here, and to represent our family line and our family, work. So it's been a internal battle of a mental game, but also a new way to kind of reimagine what Plantation is for me now versus this shame when I was like in high school graduating. And now I just feel like, okay, this is where my family settled. And as, settlers on this land, we recognize and we pay homage to so much that was here before us. And we respect and honor all of the sacrifices they had to make. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel you on that. Okay, now I'm going to shift to another similarity. I'm going to read out this line right here that says, outside of their parties, my parents were hardworking and strict. Tell me the story of a Jamaican household. That is
You already know. I mean, I think for most, BIPOC children and BIPOC, youth, coming up in any household where your parents are going to make sure that you understand the sacrifices that were made that entailed their level of restrictions that they were going to control. And I think for me, it was my sister, myself, and my brother that, we took the different brunts of my parents. My brother was able to do certain things. My sister was able to get away with certain things. And then I was the last of all of the kids that I was the one that was really like the hammer came down, whether it was me not being able to go out after school and see friends right away, or whether coming home right away and spending time right on homework right away, or focusing in on my reading, or studying for my SATs. It was definitely it was strict, but they were also very generous with the freedom and allowing me to kind of giving me the trust. Like they gave me enough of the rope that I could do what I want, but when they felt that it was being tugged too hard, then they would pull right on back, right on. Where are you going? And then I think they also were challenged with, the change in, first generation, off the island youth. Like we were like, we want this, we want that. And they're like, wait a minute, I never had that. What are you asking for? So they grappled with that, like trying to understand, like we're not country, like we're how you were brought up. We're first generation in North America, very different demands, very different sense of, what we're being plugged into. Like, we have access. Our access points are very different than what our parents had growing up. And so we were just trying to assimilate with everyone else that was, doing things, listening to hip hop, listening to soul, going to the jam sessions and not. And so we just wanted to be a part of everyone else that was living the life. Whereas my parents were like trying to also control and restrict, but allowing some leeway, allowing some space to define. And because I think with any parent, and I know that now with my son, you can only wrangle in, you can only tighten that rope up as much as you think, because at the end of the day, we have to define and explore and live this life as these meaning beings that we are. We have to figure out what our life, value. And you can only hope that all of the intention and all of the work that you instilled in me as being a good person, that's going to embody the woman and the person that I became. And I'm pretty sure my dad is pretty proud of the woman that I've become based off of all of the rules and restrictions that him and my mom instilled in us. But it was hard. It was hard.
Yeah. Trust and believe. I already done know. I lived that life. Okay. Before I talk about when you left home, I'm curious as to like, what were some of the favorite dishes that you that your parents made?
Oh man.
I know.
Okay, so let's go like from my mom. Let's start with my mom and then I'll go to my dad, because they kind of would never have like these battles, but like my mom's dumplings to my dad's dumplings were always a little different. My mom would put a little bit of sugar and she put both baking soda, baking powder, whereas my dad would just put like maybe no baking powder and like no sweetness, but like different dumplings would be used for different, dishes that would be perfect pairing. So like my mom would like hit it out the park with her Ackee and saltfish with her dumplings, whereas my dad would make his flat, unsweetened dumplings, and they'd be perfect with like spinach and cod and bacalao. And so like those dishes for me were like two like battlegrounds. Like, okay, my mom's making the Ackee and she's coming through with the dumplings, and my dad is gonna make the spinach, or my mom makes the spinach and my dad makes the dumplings. My dad's curry goat still holds reigning true, strong. Like, it's with so much joy that when he says, I'm making goat, I'm like, yes. Because it's like to get them to make, they still make a lot of the classics at home during the weekend, but it's like to get goat is like, oh, it's a special occasion. Someone's visiting, someone's in town, it's a holiday, something of that sort. And then my mom's roasted chicken will still be one of the best things that I long for her to, I wish I could still remember how she would have made it. I've adapted, my sister and I have really adapted our own take on making a roasted chicken, but it is like it was her thing. And there was a time when she made it like just perfect. And it was like, you knew when the whole chicken was out, you couldn't resist but to go look for the neck or to pull off a wing, and she would get mad, but she'd be thrilled that we just loved her food and her, that's another extension of her love to us and anyone that was over and invited into the house.
I love it. And would you say, for my experience, like, I found that, I ate a lot of traditional Jamaican food. However, I still ate like, North American food every now and then. And was that sort of the same for you, or was it primarily Jamaican?
No, I would say it was, primarily like, so the way that it was in our house, Monday through Thursday, my mom would cook. for the most part, they both were working parents, so they would come home. She would either have something cooking in the slow cooker and then finish it, or she would have some leftovers and she would turn it into something. But for the most part, Monday through Thursday was always some home cooked, maybe meatballs and spaghetti. And then Fridays was usually like fried chicken or Chinese food. Saturday would be soup in the daytime, and then maybe pizza at night. And then Sunday was big proper cook up, family eat, feast, rice and peas, curry goat, maybe baked ziti. She would always kind of intermix, the traditional staples, but then also bring in like these, dishes that she's been wanting to make. And it was always something Italian. And I think it was always something that was like really, heavy, but like it could share, because we always ended up having tons of people at our house on Sunday. So she was always she always kind of planned for knowing that people were going to come through and want to make sure there's enough food, and pasta, is good, it stretches and everyone can get some. And, and then of course, fish was, always on the menu at some point, whether it was escovitch, whether it was grouper head, stewed down, like the amount of like classic staple Jamaican dishes for me was I always had some, whether it's curry chicken, curry goat, or oxtail, ackee and saltfish. Something was always, every week it was on the menu. And that's now, which is interesting. Not so much now for me.
Well, the same. I would say that that was a similar experience. The only difference is that, and I love ackee and saltfish. I haven't made a lot of trips to Jamaica in my life. I wasn't encouraged to speak patois in my household, but I completely understand it. But when I read that you guys had an ackee tree, I was like, OMG.
Well, the wonderful thing about South Florida is that you can grow literally everything, very similar to California, in the sense you can grow year round here as well. Certain times of the year are better. Summer months are too hot to grow, so most farmers are usually that's the down season here. But right now we're going into the new season, so we're seeing things in the ground. We're growing, chayote, okra. Ackee is blooming for its second time of the year. The ackee tree on my parents' property, it started out super tiny, and now it's a massive, massive tree that in any given harvest, we're like the freezer is packed, and we're dropping ackee off to people's doorsteps because it's too much ackee, which for most people that love it are like, what do you mean you have too much ackee?
That's what I'm trying to say. Listen, friends watching, I am not a jealous person. I don't have a jealous bone in my body. But when I'm hearing right now, my friends, it's like, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's definitely like this beautiful gift to be able to have fresh ackee so regularly. Like, I don't even remember the last time I've had to buy a can of it, because it's just, I have ackee in so many freezers. It's kind of, it really is a beautiful
thing. I'm gonna have to make a trip to Florida.
All right.
Okay. Well, speaking of trips, or making a trip in or out, whatever, I just want to talk a little bit about when you first left and what that feeling was like for you to like be like, okay, goodbye, Plantation, Florida. Like, I'm out venturing into the world.
I think I ran. I honestly think I ran. You hear when people say, I don't know if I was meant to be in this space, and I don't know if I was meant to be in this body. I don't know if I was meant to be this person. Like, I felt that way about, growing up here in South Florida. I had a great group of friends. I had a beautiful family. My sister was on her way out of, she was going to university in Tallahassee, the state capital. And, my brother was already back overseas. And so, we definitely lived our life here, and our family would come to visit from Canada. But when it was my time to go to college and figure out where I wanted to go, I was just like, I got to get out of here. And I think I embraced New York like anyone did in the 90s, because it was such a there was a lot of untouched parts of New York. There was still a lot of exploring. And, I think for me, because I had fallen in love with photography, I had fallen in love with my creative side, which is still in my life, but really, really, truly thought, that this was my way out, and this was the only place I could go to, and that I could finally be someplace where someone could understand me, and that I didn't need to explain, that I'm Canadian and I'm Jamaican and I'm Black, and I may not sound like I'm from anywhere, but I sound like I'm from everywhere. Like, that whole thing for me was like, nobody cares about where you're from in New York. They just want to know, like, what are you doing here? And hey, do you want to go to this party, or do you want to go, here or there? So for me, it was like, I get a chance to kind of find out who I am.
Right.
First time away from my parents. It was the first time away from my sister. And as the last child of a big family, like, I was craving to find, like, to make my own identity and my own self, and to live in and to be like operating in the space of a new city and figure out those corners and get lost in New York. And, it was a pleasure. My mom was really worried and uncertain if it was the right move. But I think once I got settled in, once I moved into my dorms, once school started, once I started to really kind of get into the life of New York, I think she knew deep down in her heart that, I was a smart person, and I do my best to stay out of trouble. And, I would make good decisions based on all of the life skills that they had given to me. And it was, it was a joy to get out of Florida.
You were out of there. Okay, now I'm going to shift from photography, creative, and turning that creativity or activating a different creativity with food. And when you got into NGI, the Natural Gourmet Institute,
Yeah.
tell me about that. Like, you know what I mean? Like that whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely, like when people tell you, you really got to listen to your gut, and you look out for signs throughout your life, and you're like, do I go to the left? Do I go to the right? What's the decision to be made? I think this decision to follow my passion as a chef there were so many signs that were going off. It was kind of like alarming that I had taken me a bit longer than I thought to kind of take this leap of faith. But when I knew to take it, I didn't even question it. I didn't ask 100 people like I typically would be like, what do you think? What do you think? Like, I was like, no, I'm doing this. And, it all started when I turned 30, and I had been working as an executive at MTV Networks. And that space in your life where you're so unhappy with what's going on, and you just needed to make a change. You wake up in the morning and you're kind of curled over, like, don't want to get out of bed. That was kind of my feeling at certain stages with working at MTV. And, my best friend she was always in tune with what's going on with me. And she was like, I think you need to get out of the city. And I went out of the city for one weekend, and I came back a new person. Like, I came back with this desire to want to flip the table and want to explore something else. And I had heard about the Natural Gourmet Institute through a friend, but more than anything else, I wanted to find a place that would allow me to understand food and healing, and it being more than just like, butter, heavy butter, flour, animal byproducts. I wanted to understand food in a way of, uplifting your spirit, education, awareness, activism, sustainability. And whether those words were in my mind or not, I think I was already an activist. I had been, to the Million Women's March. I had been at the women's movement march in DC, so like I knew that I wanted to be able to be about some change. And I knew that if I was going to do that, food might be that right vehicle for me to be able to kind of guide and lead and navigate. And the Natural Gourmet like had this, training program that would be, it was an accelerated program that would allow you to basically do a 2-year, degree and graduate, do some hours towards an externship, and then you would be working in the field. And that's exactly what I did. And I don't think I looked back once, even though folks were like, but your job at MTV, it's this, you're that, you're here, you're there, and I just was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm about to jump off this cliff. And I want to get as far away from this. And I want to see what I could make with this newfound craft and this talent to explore. And that's exactly what I did. And the Natural Gourmet was exactly what I needed. And the signs I listened to a few key people that I think I always turn back to, which was my sister and my dad at times as well. But definitely my best friend giving me this beautiful gift to get out of the city is really kind of what set the tone for me to kind of direct myself into a love that I don't think I could go leave. Even if I'm out of the kitchen, I've been out of the kitchen for almost 2 years now, but I still live in love for hospitality. I still live in love for food and healing and creation and expansion and loving and storytelling. So it's now a gift to be able to continue to do this and to do it in this way. I feel honored to do it every day.
I love that. I feel the same. I feel like when you started talking, so interesting. I had already had a section highlighted and you kind of touched on it. So I just want to touch on it a little bit more, and it's about your activism. There is a section in the book that reads, and it is in the section of work, my friends, just so that you guys know, and I'm reading page 97, and the top of that page, it reads, "What I know about myself is I'm passionate about equal rights and abhor racism of any kind. I'm also a practical person and a good judge of character. Life isn't just about ideals, morality, and judgment. It's about you and me, real people, complicated needs, faces at a table." And I love that. I also do advocacy work as well. So, I mean, if you wanted to just touch a little bit more on that.
Yeah. Like I think so much of, about this understanding that each one teach one, and we are, before us were so many, and their backs were the backs that we're standing on and lifting us up. And I think when I started writing this book and I started talking to my aunts and my uncles about my grandmother, my great grandmother, starting to learn about the incredible women, the matriarchs in my family, both sides, and what they were able to do and how they were able to impact and change and shift, it was almost inevitable that I was like, for me to fall into this place in my life in being an activist, because they themselves were these activated women that were fighting, against the first, the English when they were coming into Jamaica. They were in the foothill mountains of Jamaica defending, and I think about my dad and his mother and her providing food for the community in Kingston, and how important that role was for so many families, that they got a meal to eat, the workers got a meal to eat. And so I just think that so much of my work that I'm honored to be, invited in to participate with, is also this work that, I've learned from the many generations that walked this earth before me, that have been doing it and has given me this passion and this craft and this understanding that settling is not necessarily your option in all course, and that fighting and pushing and going towards fear and not straying, pulling back away from fear, but actually heading into it, heading into the most darkest places when you think that you are alone, but knowing that you're not, and that you do have the many people that have been before you that are there lifting you up and holding you steady. And, I feel like that is still so prone for the work that I'm doing, whether it's with Not 9 to 5, whether it's with Food Share, whether it's here in my new community in South Florida, or even back home in Toronto. I think it's still something that has been ingrained in me. It's almost stained in my skin and my fingerprints. And I don't see a way of me not doing this work and not being activated by the many, imbalances that I see. And I want to make sure that if I have an opportunity to stand up and voice, then I will, and I will listen, and I will hear, and I will scream louder. I will lift you up so your voice can go to raise up. So, yeah.
I love that. Okay. So I cannot believe that we're like almost winding down. I think we've got about 10 minutes, but I do have a couple more things that I want to ask. If anybody has any questions for Suzanne, feel free to put it in the chat, and we will address that a little bit in a few minutes. But my first question that I want to just talk about was Saturday Dinette.
Yeah.
Because, the first sentence of that section is, when I think of Saturday Dinette, I think of the purest joy and the deepest pain. My first restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It lives in this paradigm where I am in constant, longing for it again, but also thrilled that it is no longer present because of how much pain it did bring to myself, my family, and, to my team, and to the many folks that did work with us. And, we were so privileged to be there at the right time and in that moment to be able to celebrate food at that point and what was going on in the conversations around food, but also at that corner in Leslieville, Logan and Gerard, and what that meant for that, still not so busy corner, but that part of town hadn't really seen much movement.
Right.
And, we were not the first. We were, definitely will not be the last. But, I think what we were able to bring to that neighborhood was a place that people really were able to resonate with. And I'm just thrilled to have been able to do that. I know how special and important it is when you have that restaurant that, whether it's a Monday night or a Sunday evening or afternoon, that's a spot that you always will end up, or you long to take someone to when you feel like, gosh, you need to try this, or I just need a drink, or I just want that one plate of food, and I think that, I know how, that makes a community feel like they are supported, but also as a restaurant owner, we felt so supported. We felt so loved. And still to this day, I get emails and DMs on Instagram, on social media that are just, whether it's just like a quick little reminder, hey, your photo of Saturday Dinette brunch came up, and I just wanted to thank you again for that memory and that moment in time where we were there on that special day, and it's a real privilege to still be able to celebrate a place that made such a mark in that part of town, for so many people. And still for people that are like, I never went, but I swear to God, I swear if it was open, I would be there, because of how many people would tell me about the spot. And we didn't know what we were doing. Other than that we had to keep going.
Yeah.
And the day that we had to stop, it felt like it didn't feel right, but it felt necessary in order for the chapter to just end. And I still am in contact with a lot of the staff, a lot of my team that was there with us. And we still celebrate, we still laugh, we still cackle over, our brunches and our family meals and all of that great stuff. But, Yeah, one day we were just talking about the possibility of doing a Saturday Dinette tribute, and book or a zine or something, just to kind of celebrate diners, because I think the significance of diners is a conversation that is a bit understated, and I don't think I hear it, and I understand the impact that diners make on communities and neighborhoods and places and cities, and I think that let's not lose that. Let's not forget about the impact of, small town corner diners and what they've brought over the years of history, both in this country and around the world.
Agreed. I couldn't agree with you more. Okay, so almost near the end of what I would love to ask, I'm just going to read a few lines from The Rite of Passage. And this to me is also so me here. So when I read it, I was like, highlight. And it reads, there are so many things I want to do. I'm not stopping. I hang those photos of civil rights heroes in my restaurants because they inspire me. They remind me that this life is a gift. Nurture it. I want to make a contribution. If I can hold on to just a little of their courage, a spark of their flame, keep it burning in the kitchen. I love that. What an inspiration. I absolutely, I love that line.
Yeah.
I love that line.
Suzanne Hancock, my writing partner, her gift with words and language, and our partnership that we have had over the years of working together, and now to be able to be so proud of this body of work that we both created together. It still amazes me that we started out thinking one thing about what this book was going to be, and then what we were able to put together in completion, it feels exactly what we were supposed to do, even though we had something very different in our mind. And I think that the words speak so true to the voice, the message, the passion, the love that we both share in storytelling and being able to tell people stories. And for a long time I used to say, like, who cares about my story? Who needs to hear about my story? What does my story matter? But I think that my story, like anyone's story, every story matters.
It all matters. It all matters. And you don't know how many people's story to interject that you connect with. Because for me, like, it was, for me being like first gen of Jamaican parents, I don't read a lot of stories that I resonate with, like people's true stories that I resonate with. So yeah, you have to tell your story. Story. Okay, before we wind down, we got to talk about the recipes section.
Yeah.
We got it. So
more.
Right? If you haven't gotten this book, the beauty about this book is, like, it is a beautiful read, right? So I feel like I'm reading fiction, even though it's like somebody's true story. So that's one thing. The photography, the photos are just placed so beautifully. I love a book with photos, I'm not gonna lie. So we're here for that. And then the fact that there are recipes in the back. I love
that. We had to. We weren't really sure if it would fit, but I think it definitely is like giving everyone this everlasting taste of what we're talking about. The food at the end of the day is what brought us to the table. So that why not leave you with a bit of a little more to keep it.
Absolutely. And as we're winding down, I just want to let everybody know that I'm going to try out the oxtail patties.
Yes.
Because I make patties and I have yet to make oxtail patties. So I'm going to definitely do that and show the peeps. And the other thing is pepper shrimp, because one of the things that I remember of my very few times going to Jamaica is pepper shrimp. And I am here to basically try that out. So, OMG. Okay. I realize that we've been here for about an hour. I just want to ask if you have any, closing words, Suzanne. Like, I just want to thank you so much for hanging out with us. But is there anything that you would like to close off with?
I understand how important it is to celebrate the food, the nuances that are resonating so heavily in the world right now. And I think that let's just remember at the end of the day that whether it's food, whether it's story, all of these things, have a place in our life. And as complex and as lonely as it can feel and be at times, I think that just try to reflect back on just being a lot more gentler with ourselves, and to be able to just celebrate the moment that you're currently in, and knowing that sometimes things aren't as it is, and most of the times things are just temporary. And in that feeling and in that moment, it might feel so heavy, but trust that there is another emotion that it can evolve to, and it's our power, it's our worth, it's our opportunity to really connect with that. And I say that as someone that is a tough critic of myself and my work, but even I in my many moments am challenged with, like, is this good? Am I good enough? Is this enough? Am I doing the right thing? But being gentler, giving everyone around us a bit more space. We're all still going through a lot in this time right now. And it all sometimes just needs to be walked with a bit more of a gentler step. And that's what I'd love to leave everybody with.
Oh, thank you so much, Suzanne. Oh, this was like such a wonderful conversation. I have been inspired since I read this book, since we've been connected. I am hoping that one of these lovely days we meet in person.
Yes.
Yes, you are amazing and an inspiration. And I can't wait to eat some of your food. I cannot wait for all that. But really, I'm really looking forward to trying out some of these recipes, because the book was a delight. My Ackee tree, Suzanne Barr, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us and, hearing our conversation. I hope it was entertaining. I hope you enjoyed our convo. And I noticed that there wasn't really any questions in the comment section or anything. There was some great comments, though, so thank you. For anyone who has been watching, just know that you can purchase a copy of My Ackee Tree today by visiting our official bookseller, Iron Dog Books. And the website will be, there will be like a link in our chat, I believe. And I want to thank all the staff, volunteers at Word Vancouver for making this possible. There are plenty more events happening, so please check out the complete listings at wordvancouver.ca. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, Necole. Thank you, everyone, the whole team at Word. It's been fantastic. And have a wonderful rest of the conference. Enjoy yourself and embrace, the wonders of reading and just authorship and all of this.
Great. Thank you.